Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're far from empires and stone cities. You're in 1880s Manitoba, where the prairie stretches wide and quiet, beneath a pale sky, and a single telegraph line cuts across the snow like a fragile thought held together by wood, wire, and persistence. You're not an inventor or an official, just an ordinary telegraph repairman, walking mile after mile, climbing frozen poles, keeping distant voices alive in a land that does not care if they fall silent. Before we start, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair, plus other sleep tools, in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You wake before the light has decided whether it will arrive at all. The room is still dark, but not the gentle dark of night. This darkness feels heavier, pressed flat by cold, as if the air itself has been left outside too long and forgotten how to move. Frost has traced pale veins along the inside of the window, delicate and patient, as though the cold has been awake far longer than you have. It does not hurry, it never has to. You lie still for a moment listening. There is no sound beyond your own breath and the faint settling of wood. The walls creak softly, not in complaint, but in resignation. They have learned this winter well. They know what is coming. When you finally sit up, the cold reaches you at once. It does not rush. It simply arrives, already certain of its claim. Your breath clouds the air, thin and brief, disappearing almost as soon as it forms. You swing your legs down to the floor, and the boards are hard beneath your feet, unyielding, as though warmth is a concept they have agreed to suspend until spring remembers this place again. You dress slowly. There is no reason to hurry. The day will be long regardless. Each layer of clothing feels stiff, as if it resents being moved. Wool scratches faintly at your skin. Leather resists your hands. Nothing here is comfortable, but it is familiar. Comfort was never part of the arrangement. Survival, perhaps. Routine, certainly. Outside, the world waits. When you open the door, the cold greets you without ceremony. It is brighter than the room, a pale, endless brightness that flattens the land and removes unnecessary detail. Snow stretches in every direction, smooth and untouched, as if the earth has been simplified down to its most basic form. Sky and ground seem undecided about where one ends and the other begins. You pause on the threshold, not out of hesitation, but habit. A moment to let your eyes adjust. A moment to feel the cold settle properly into your lungs. Breathing here is always an act of acceptance. Somewhere far off, a line of poles cuts across the prairie, dark strokes against the white. They're easy to miss if you're not looking for them. That seems fitting. The work you do exists in much the same way, essential, invisible, and rarely considered until it fails. You close the door behind you, careful to latch it properly. Small mistakes grow quickly in this place. Snow crunches under your boots, sharp and brittle, each step sounding louder than it should in the quiet. There is no wind yet, but the air feels unfinished, as though it is only waiting for the right moment to begin moving again. As you walk, your thoughts drift without effort. Mornings like this encourage reflection, though not the sentimental kind. You think about the line, stretching across distances too wide for a man to truly grasp. Thin wires carrying words faster than horses, faster than rivers, faster than the weather that so often breaks them. Messages of business, instruction, reassurance, urgency. Messages that will arrive because you will climb and splice and tighten and descend again. You have never read most of them. That is not your role. You touch the wire, you do not listen to it. There is something honest in that arrangement. The poles rise closer now, Wooden and tall, their surfaces glazed with ice. They look less like tools than obstacles, placed deliberately to test resolve rather than serve purpose. Each one has been driven into frozen ground by men who believed strongly in progress. Men who imagined the future as something that moved forward in a straight, obedient line. You wonder, not for the first time, whether they ever considered who would maintain that line when the novelty wore off. Your gloves are already stiff as you flex your fingers. The leather creases reluctantly. You breathe into them briefly, a small warmth that disappears almost at once. It is enough. It always has to be. The prairie around you remains quiet, vast, unconcerned. It does not acknowledge your arrival or your labour. Snow does not part for ambition. Ice does not soften for intention. The land allows you to exist upon it, nothing more. You reach the base of the first pole and stop. Looking up, the wires stretch away into the distance, vanishing into the pale sky. Somewhere along that line, a break waits. Perhaps several. It is not important to know where yet. You will find them as you always do, one careful climb at a time. You set down your bag and rest your hand briefly against the pole. The wood is cold, even through your glove, rough beneath the ice. There is a faint smell of resin trapped inside it, preserved from a warmer season that feels more imagined than remembered. For a moment you stand there, breathing slowly, feeling the weight of the day settle into place. Not dread, not determination, something quieter, acceptance perhaps, or understanding. This work does not promise reward, it promises continuity. The line must remain, the messages must pass. That is reason enough. You adjust your grip, set your spikes and prepare to climb, knowing that above you the wire waits, thin and patient, already carrying the weight of expectations it never agreed to bear. The world remains white, the air remains cold, and the day, whether you are ready or not, has begun. You do not begin by climbing. You begin by kneeling in the snow, breath rising steadily, the world held at a careful distance, while your hands move through familiar motions. The bag at your side rests heavily against the ground, its canvas darkened by age, stiffened by years of cold mornings like this one. When you open it, the smell escapes first. Old leather, metal, oil that has thickened with time. The scent of work repeated so often, it has worn away any pretense of novelty. Inside nothing shines. There are no clever devices, no excess, only the tools that have proven stubborn enough to remain useful. You take them out one by one, not because they require inspection, but because this ritual slows the day into something manageable. The gloves come first, leather cracked and polished smooth, in places where your fingers have bent them into obedience. You slide your hands inside, feeling the cold linger despite the barrier. The gloves were never meant to defeat winter. They only soften its grip, just enough to allow movement. That has always been the quiet compromise between man and weather here. You flex your fingers, listening to the faint creak of leather. Each movement reminds you that warmth is temporary, sensation even more so. You have learned to work without relying on either. Next come the iron spikes, heavy for their size, dull-edged but unforgiving. You lift one, turning it slowly in your hand. It bears scratches, small chips along its surface, marks left by poles that resisted being climbed. These spikes do not promise safety, they promise purchase. A slight advantage, that is all. You strap them carefully to your boots, pulling the worn leather straps tight. The buckles resist, metal biting cold against your fingers. You do not rush them. Rushing leads to mistakes, and mistakes here are not corrected gently. When the spikes are secured, you stand and press your weight down, experimentally. The iron teeth bite into the frozen ground with a reassuring scrape. You take a moment then, standing still, to feel how your body balances differently now. How each step will carry a new weight, a new sound. The spikes change the rhythm of walking. They announce your presence to the snow, to the wood, to the pole that waits. From the bag you remove the smaller things. Pliers with jaws worn smooth. A spool of wire coiled patiently, already accepting that much of it will be used only to undo what weather has done. Insulators wrapped carefully in cloth, fragile in a way the rest of your tools are not. You handle these with particular care. Porcelain does not forgive carelessness. You arrange everything deliberately, not because it must be done in a certain order, but because order itself offers a small sense of control. In a land that disregards intention, order becomes a quiet act of defiance. As you work, the coal deepens its presence. It seeps through seams, settles into joints. Your breath grows slower, more deliberate. You have learned not to fight this sensation. Fighting wastes energy. Acceptance conserves it. The tools lie ready now, spread out at your feet. You look at them without expectation. They will not save you. They will not make the climb easy. They will only allow it to happen. There is a peculiar honesty in that. You think briefly of the men who designed this work from far away. Offices with stoves burning steadily, desks piled with papers that spoke of expansion, connection, progress. They imagined a line crossing the province, tying settlements together, pulling Manitoba closer to the rest of the world. They did not imagine this moment. The kneeling in snow, the stiffened fingers, the careful handling of tools that barely suffice. Perhaps imagination was never required for that part. You stand and shoulder the bag again. It sits where it always does, pressing against your back, reminding you with every step that you're carrying what little hope the day allows. Not hope of success exactly, hope of continuation, of keeping the line alive one more day. As you walk toward the pole, your boots crunch rhythmically, spikes striking ice and snow. The sound is steady, grounding. You find comfort in repetition. Each step is proof that you are still moving, still capable of movement. That matters more than ambition ever did. At the base of the pole, you pause again. This pause is different from the first. Now the world narrows. The pole fills your vision. The tools fade into background knowledge. You reach up and grip the wood, feeling the texture through your gloves. Rough beneath the ice, uneven, marked by years of weather and hands like yours. You test your grip, then your footing. The spikes bite. The pole holds. It always does, until it doesn't. There is no prayer spoken aloud, no grand appeal to fate. If there is faith here, it is quiet and practical. Faith that the leather will hold, that the iron will bite, that your body will remember how to climb, even when sensation fades. You begin the ascent slowly, one foot then the other. The spikes scrape, settle, scrape again. Your hands move up the pole in small increments, fingers tightening and releasing, tightening and releasing. The cold sharpens as you rise, wind finding you more easily now. Below you, the tools wait. Above you, the wire stretches onward, already burdened with messages you will never hear. Between them, you climb. As the ground recedes, you become aware of how little separates you from the air. A slip, a misjudged placement. The tools do not erase this knowledge. They simply make it tolerable. You breathe steadily, counting movements rather than seconds. The climb is not dramatic. It is methodical. Each motion practiced enough to feel inevitable. And in that inevitability, you find something like calm. The tools have done what they always do, not saved you, not comforted you, simply allowed the work to continue. You reach higher, the wire closer now, humming faintly in the cold, carrying its unseen cargo across the white, waiting world. The pole does not welcome you. It stands without expression, dark against the pale sky, its surface glazed in a thin skin of ice that catches the light without offering warmth. Up close, it smells faintly of old sap and wet wood, a scent locked beneath years of weather. You rest your gloved hands against it and feel the cold push back, firm and unquestioning. This is not an object meant to be touched for comfort. It exists to be used, endured, and left behind. You look upward. The wire disappears into the brightness above, a narrow line drawn across an otherwise empty sky. It hums faintly, not loudly enough to call attention to itself, just enough to remind you that something is still moving through it. Words, instructions, expectations. They pass overhead without noticing the man about to climb toward them. You plant your foot and drive the spike into the wood. There is a brief resistance, then a dull bite as iron finds purchase. The sound is sharp and final, like a decision made without ceremony. Your other foot follows, the pole accepting your weight with a muted creak. It has held men before, it will hold you now until it decides otherwise. You begin to climb. The movement is slow, deliberate, almost cautious, not because you're afraid, but because haste serves no purpose here. Each step requires attention. The spikes scrape, settle, and bite again. Your hands slide upward in small increments, fingers tightening around frozen wood, then releasing, then tightening again. The rhythm becomes steady, nearly hypnotic. Cold sharpens as you rise. What little shelter the ground provided falls away, and the air moves more freely now, brushing against your face, finding gaps in your clothing. Your breath deepens, each inhale careful, each exhale forming a pale cloud that drifts away and vanishes. The cold takes those clouds immediately, erasing proof that you were ever there. Halfway up, your arms begin to feel the familiar weight, not pain exactly, more a quiet insistence from muscles that know what is being asked of them and have already accepted it. The pole offers no softness. Your body leans into it anyway, adapting, redistributing weight, learning again how to hold itself against gravity and ice. Below you, the ground looks flatter than it did before. Distance simplifies things. Snow becomes a continuous surface, unmarred by detail. You do not linger on the view. Looking down serves no useful function. The work exists above and ahead. Your gloves, stiff moments ago, now feel less distinct. Sensation dulls first at the fingertips, then spreads outward. You notice it without concern. This too is familiar. Your hands will continue to move long after they stop fully reporting what they feel. They have learned the shape of the work well enough to proceed without commentary. The pole creaks again as you shift your weight. The sound travels through the wood and into you, a reminder that this structure is not as solid as it pretends to be. It has absorbed storms, heat, cold, insects, rot. It has been driven into ground that freezes and thaws year after year. Stability here is temporary, negotiated daily. You climb anyway. The wire grows closer, its faint vibration more noticeable now. You reach one hand toward it, stopping just short. Touching it too soon would accomplish nothing. First, you must secure yourself. One more step, then another. Each movement narrows your focus until the rest of the world fades into irrelevance. At the height where the work begins, you pause. Your legs press firmly against the pole, spikes holding fast. Your arms rest for a moment, elbows bent, shoulders tight. You do not rush to recover. Rest here is not about comfort, it is about allowing the body to steady itself before continuing. You glance along the line. It stretches away in both directions, vanishing into whiteness. Somewhere far down that wire, someone waits for a message. Somewhere else, someone sends one without thinking about the path it must take to arrive. Neither imagines this moment, neither needs to. You reach into your bag, movement slower now, more deliberate. Fingers fumble briefly, then find what they are looking for. The pliers feel heavy in your hand, their metal biting cold even through leather. You bring them up carefully, mindful of balance. Dropping them would mean a long climb down, followed by an even longer climb back up. Inefficiency is another form of cold. You inspect the wire. Ice clings to it in small ridges, each one adding weight, strain, inevitability. You clear it gently, flakes falling soundlessly into the snow below. The wire flexes slightly under your touch, resilient but tired. You think, not unkindly, that it resembles the men tasked with maintaining it. As you work, time stretches. There is no clock here, no schedule beyond daylight and endurance. Your movements repeat themselves. Grip, adjust, secure. Each action leads naturally to the next, forming a loop that feels older than the system it supports. Progress reveals itself only in absence. A repaired line looks no different than an intact one. Success is invisible. The wind brushes past you again, colder now, finding the sweat that has begun to form beneath your layers. The chill sharpens, reminding you that exertion carries its own costs. Warmth earned through movement is borrowed warmth. It must be repaid quickly. You finish the immediate task and secure your tools again. Your hands linger on the wire for a brief moment, feeling its tension, its quiet persistence. It hums faintly, indifferent to your presence, already focused on carrying whatever comes next. The descent begins with the same care as the climb. 1 foot lowers, the spike scraping before it bites. Hands move down the pole, reversing the path they traced moments ago. Gravity assists now, but it offers no kindness. A misstep here would carry consequences just as severe. As you near the ground, your legs feel heavier. Not weaker, just aware. The earth rises to meet you, and when your boots finally press into the snow again, the contact feels both solid and strangely distant. The world widens back out, reclaiming your attention. You step away from the pole and look up once more. It stands unchanged, still bearing the line, still pretending permanence. You know better. Another storm will come. Another break will form. You will climb again, or someone like you will. For now, the line holds. You shoulder your bag and turn toward the next pole, already visible in the distance. The path between them is unremarkable, a stretch of snow and silence. Your steps fall into rhythm, spikes marking time against ice and earth. The work continues, not as a series of tasks, but as a single, unbroken motion forward, carrying you deeper into the white, waiting world. You walk on with the wire beside you now, sometimes above, sometimes just within sight, a narrow line guiding your movement across the prairie. The land stretches outward without interruption, white and level, offering no sense of scale beyond what your legs can measure. Distance here is not dramatic. It is simply long. It asks for patience rather than courage. Each pole appears much like the last, rising from the snow with the same quiet insistence. Between them, the wire sags slightly, carrying its own weight, the burden of ice, the accumulated expectations of people who will never see this place. You keep an eye on it as you move, watching for the small irregularities that signal trouble. A twist where there should be none. A faint dip that suggests strain. The line speaks in subtle ways, if you learn how to listen. As you walk, you think about what moves along that wire, not the technical process, you know that well enough. You think instead about the nature of what travels faster than any man can follow. Words that once would have taken weeks, carried by horse and wagon, risking rivers, storms, exhaustion. Words that might never have arrived at all. Now they pass overhead in moments. You imagine a message leaving a warm office, ink still drying, sent by someone who has not felt true cold in years. It begins its journey confident, purposeful, unaware of the distance it must cross. It does not know about the prairie, about the wind that scours the land clean, about the poles that stand like quiet sentinels in a place that refuses to care about intentions. The wire accepts the message without judgment. It carries joy and grief with equal indifference. Orders and apologies share the same path. News of births travels alongside news of deaths, both reduced to brief signals passing through metal and space. The wire does not slow for sorrow. It does not linger over happiness. You find a certain honesty in that. The land around you remains unchanged as these thoughts drift through your mind. Snow reflects light upward, brightening the underside of the sky. There is no tree here, no building, no marker of human presence beyond the line you follow. Without it, the prairie would look untouched, as though nothing had ever passed this way. You know better. You have walked these distances before. You know how many men it took to plant these poles, to string this wire, to imagine connection where none existed. You also know how easily the land reclaims its silence. A few heavy storms, a season of neglect, and the line would vanish back into the white, as though it had never been. The wire hums faintly as the wind brushes against it. The sound is barely audible, more felt than heard, a thin vibration that travels down the length of metal. It reminds you that something is moving, even when everything else appears still. Motion here is subtle. It hides inside quiet. You stop at the next pole and set down your bag. The routine unfolds again, without conscious thought. Hands move. Spikes bite. The climb begins. Each ascent feels both familiar and slightly different, shaped by small variations in the pole, the ice, the wind. Repetition does not erase attention. It sharpens it. Halfway up you pause briefly, not from fatigue but from habit. The wire is closer now, the land farther away. From here, the prairie looks endless in every direction, a blankness broken only by the dark line you maintain. It occurs to you that for all the talk of shrinking distances, this place remains immense. Messages may move quickly, but men still walk slowly. You reach the wire and begin your inspection. Ice has built up again, thicker than before. It clings stubbornly, adding weight that the wire was never designed to carry for long. You clear it carefully, flakes falling away in soft showers that disappear before they reach the ground. Each movement sends a faint tremor along the line, rippling outward toward places you will never see. You wonder briefly where that tremor goes, how far it travels before it fades into nothing. There is something comforting in the thought that even small actions echo across distance, however briefly. It suggests that effort, though temporary, is not entirely isolated. As you work, your thoughts drift to the people who rely on this connection without understanding it. Merchants waiting for prices, officials waiting for instructions, families waiting for reassurance. The wire makes all of them impatient. When communication becomes quick, waiting feels unnatural, almost offensive. Delay turns into failure. Silence becomes a problem to be solved. You have learned that silence is often just the land being itself. The wire does not promise certainty. It only offers speed. And speed has a way of convincing people that they are closer to control than they truly are. You have seen too many lines snap under the weight of ice and optimism to believe that illusion. Your fingers move steadily despite the cold, despite the numbness creeping further into your hands. The work requires precision, but not haste. You align the wire, secure it, test its tension. It responds as expected, taut but forgiving. For now. When you finish, you linger a moment longer than necessary, resting against the pole, looking out across the empty province. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, cities grow louder, more crowded, more convinced of their importance. Here, the land remains unchanged, unimpressed by progress, unmoved by intention. You begin your descent, movements careful and unhurried. The ground rises to meet you again, firm and cold. You step away from the pole and gather your bag, feeling its familiar weight settle against you. As you walk onward, the wire continues beside you, carrying its unseen cargo. You follow it not because it leads somewhere meaningful, but because it needs tending. That is enough. The prairie stretches ahead, wide and quiet, and you move through it at the same measured pace, a small figure beneath a vast sky, keeping words alive as they pass over a land that has no interest in listening. The change does not announce itself. There is no sudden wall of wind, no dramatic darkening of the sky. Instead, the air grows thicker by degrees, as though the space between things has quietly decided to fill itself in. Snow begins to fall in fine grains, light enough at first that you barely register it as anything more than texture. It settles on your coat, on your bag, on the wire itself, clinging without urgency. You keep walking. The prairie has taught you that attention comes too late if it waits for spectacle. By the time weather becomes obvious, it has already taken its position. The snow continues, each flake unremarkable on its own, together forming a veil that softens edges and shortens distance. Poles that once stood clear against the sky now seem closer together, as if the land has drawn them inward for company. The wire grows harder to follow with your eyes. You rely more on memory now, on the quiet confidence that it must be there, because it always has been. Your boots crunch steadily, the sound muted by fresh snow. Even your breathing seems quieter, absorbed by the thickening air. The wind arrives later, not with force, but with persistence. It slides across the surface of the land, lifting loose snow and carrying it sideways, blurring what little contrast remains. The horizon fades first, then the sky, then the sense that you are moving through anything at all. Direction becomes a habit rather than a sight. You stop at the next pole, or what you believe is the next pole. It emerges gradually from the white, its dark shape forming only when you are close enough to touch it. Snow has already begun to cling to its surface, filling cracks, smoothing roughness. It looks older somehow, less defined, as though the storm is gently revising it. You set down your bag and begin the climb. The pole feels different now. Ice and snow have altered its texture, softened its grip in places, hardened it in others. Your spikes bite less cleanly. You adjust, pressing harder, placing each step with greater care. The wind brushes against you as you rise, tugging lightly at your coat, testing balance without malice. Halfway up, the world narrows further. The snow moves in every direction at once, carried by shifting currents you cannot see. Up and down lose clarity. The pole becomes the only reliable reference, a vertical certainty in a space that refuses to orient itself. You reach the wire and immediately see the problem. Ice has accumulated faster than before, thickening the line, pulling it downward with patient insistence. The storm has found its weakness and is exploiting it without emotion. You work carefully, clearing what you can. Snow blows back into your face, stinging briefly before melting against your skin. Your fingers feel clumsy now, sensation dulled by cold and repetition. You rely on muscle memory, on the quiet competence built over years of doing the same work in slightly different conditions. As you clear the ice, you know it will return, perhaps within hours, perhaps sooner. The storm has time. You do not. There is no frustration in this realization. That would require believing the outcome could be otherwise. Instead, there is a calm acknowledgement. The line is not meant to be perfect. It is meant to endure just long enough to matter. You secure the wire as best you can and pause, leaning into the pole, letting your body rest while it can. Snow collects on your shoulders, on your hat, adding weight that you feel only vaguely. The wind carries the faint hum of the wire away, scattering it into the storm until it becomes indistinguishable from everything else. For a moment, the world feels entirely empty. No landmarks, no distance, no direction, just movement and cold, and the quiet understanding that you are very small within a very large indifference. You descend carefully, each step deliberate. The ground greets you without ceremony, boots sinking slightly into fresh snow. Already your footprints are beginning to fade, softened at the edges, then filled in entirely. The storm erases evidence as quickly as you create it. You shoulder your bag and move on, guided now by memory and instinct more than sight. The next pole exists because it must. You walk until it reveals itself, emerging from the white, like a thought returning after distraction. At this pole, the damage is worse. A section of wire has snapped under the combined weight of ice and wind. It hangs uselessly, a thin arc disappearing into the snow. You feel no surprise at the sight. Breaks like this are not failures. They are conversations between weather and material, long and ongoing. You begin the repair. The storm works against you without urgency. Snow fills your gloves as you handle the wire. Wind presses steadily, forcing you to lean into the pole more than usual. Your breath comes slower now, each inhale carefully measured to avoid the sharp bite of cold air deep in your chest. As you splice the wire, your thoughts wander in small, unambitious circles. You think about how many times this line has broken before, how many times it will break again. The people sending messages today will likely never know about this interruption, or if they do, they will forget it quickly. Delay has a short memory. The storm does not. It has done this before, long before wires crossed the prairie. It will do it again long after they are gone. You are not opposing it. You are simply working within its schedule. When the repair is complete, you test the line. It holds, for now. The wire hums faintly, the sound immediately swallowed by wind and snow. You pack your tools with stiff fingers, movements slower now, more deliberate. Fatigue settles quietly into your limbs, not as pain, but as weight. You move on again. The storm thickens further, visibility shrinking until even the nearest pole feels distant. You count steps between landmarks, trusting numbers more than eyes. The world has reduced itself to what is immediately present. The sound of your boots, the feel of cold air, the faint pull of the bag against your shoulder. Time stretches strangely in the storm. Minutes lose shape. Progress is measured not in distance, but in persistence. You continue because stopping would require a reason, and reasons feel abstract out here. Eventually the wind eases slightly. Not enough to clear the air, but enough to remind you that even storms have limits. Snow continues to fall, softer now, less aggressive. The world remains blurred, but less hostile. You stop beneath another pole and look up, squinting through the drifting white. The wire is there, faint but present, still carrying words, still connecting places that believe themselves closer than they are. You prepare to climb again, knowing that whatever you fix will not last, and accepting that this does not make the work meaningless. The storm moves around you, patient and thorough, erasing and reshaping as it always has, and you move within it, slower, smaller, keeping the line alive just long enough for the next message to pass through the white, waiting world. The storm thins without truly leaving. Snow still drifts across the land, but the wind has softened, its edges worn down by time and distance. What remains is the cold itself, settled and patient, no longer moving with intent. It does not need to. It has already reached everything it intends to reach. You feel it now in a deeper way, not as a shock, not as pain, but as a gradual narrowing. Sensation pulls inward, retreating from the surface of your skin as though conserving itself. Your fingers feel thick inside the gloves, slow to respond, as if they belong to someone else who has agreed to help only when absolutely necessary. When you flex them, the movement registers late, arriving with a faint pressure rather than a clear signal. Breathing changes too. You no longer draw air without thinking. Each inhale is measured, controlled, careful not to invite too much cold too quickly. Your lungs have learned this lesson well. They take only what they need and no more. The prairie stretches on, pale and quiet, the storm's work already beginning to erase itself into something less dramatic and more enduring. Snow settles into place, smoothing what the wind disturbed, sealing over tracks and marks. The land resumes its familiar stillness, as though the brief violence of weather was only a minor interruption. You move through it steadily, the wire once again visible overhead, dark against the washed-out sky. It dips slightly between poles, its shape altered by ice and repair, but it remains intact, for now. Your body carries the weight of the hours without complaint. Muscles work because they must. Joints bend because they always have. The sharpness of discomfort has dulled, replaced by something quieter, a persistent awareness that never quite fades but never demands attention either. This is how endurance announces itself. Not loudly, not proudly, it simply becomes the background against which everything else occurs. You stop beneath another pole and set down your bag. The movement feels heavier than before, though the bag itself has not changed. Weight accumulates invisibly, carried inside rather than out. You shake out your arms once, slowly, listening to the faint rasp of fabric and leather. The sound feels distant, as though heard through layers of cloth and thought. Climbing begins again, but now the motions feel more internal than physical. You place your spikes without looking closely, trusting the memory stored in your legs as its legs. Your hands find the same holds they always do, fingers closing around wood without deliberation. You have climbed enough that your body understands the task, even when your thoughts drift elsewhere. And they do drift. Not toward anything specific, not toward memory or anticipation. Instead, they settle into a kind of blank attentiveness, a quiet awareness that notices without reacting. You are aware of the cold, but it does not provoke. Aware of the height, but it does not alarm. Aware of the wire, humming faintly above you, but it does not inspire curiosity. Emotion thins out here, worn down by repetition and exposure. Not erased, just softened. There is no space for sharp feeling. Anger would burn too hot and too briefly. Fear would waste energy. Even hope feels unnecessary. The work exists. You exist within it. That is sufficient. Halfway up you pause, leaning into the pole, breath slow and steady. Frost has formed along the seams of your gloves, tiny white lines tracing where warmth escapes. You brush at them absently, flakes falling away. The act feels distant, almost academic, like observing someone else's hands at work. The wire waits above you, unchanged in its purpose, altered only by the conditions it has endured. You reach it and begin your inspection with the same quiet efficiency as before. Ice has returned, thinner now, but persistent. You clear it without impatience, knowing impatience has no effect on weather or metal. As you work, you notice how your thoughts have simplified. They no longer wander far. They circle close to the task, to the immediate present. The cold has trimmed away excess. There is a certain clarity in this reduction, though it offers no comfort, only focus. You think briefly about how men speak of hardship later, when it has passed. They give it shape, meaning, lessons. Out here, it has none of those things. It is simply a condition, like the land itself. You finish the repair and test the line. It responds as expected, vibrating faintly under your touch. The sensation travels up your arm, muted by layers of numbness. You register it without comment. Descending feels slower now, not because you rush, but because your body has settled into a pace that resists change. Each movement flows into the next, without urgency. The ground rises gradually, and when your boots meet it again, the contact feels distant, as though happening a moment after it should. You step away from the pole and stand still for a moment, gathering yourself. The cold presses in from all sides, but it no longer feels invasive. It feels familiar, almost neutral, like the air itself has agreed to a quiet truce with your body. As you walk onward, your footsteps sound duller than before. Snow absorbs the impact, softening the rhythm. Even the spikes seem quieter now, their sharp scrape reduced to a subdued crunch. The world has grown hushed, and you move within that hush without disturbance. The wire continues beside you, its presence steady, unremarkable. It carries messages of urgency through a land that does not hurry. You have come to appreciate the irony of that arrangement, speed layered over stillness. Importance passing through indifference. Your mind drifts again, this time toward the simple awareness of motion. Step, breath, step, breath. The pattern holds your attention gently, asking nothing more. Time loses its shape here, stretching and compressing, according to effort rather than clocks. You stop once more beneath another pole, though you do not recall deciding to stop. Your body recognized the moment before your thoughts did. You set down the bag and begin the climb again. Movement slower now, but no less certain. Cold has settled fully into your hands, your face, your thoughts. It has taken the sharp edges and left behind something quieter. Endurance has become less an act and more a state. You are not enduring the cold so much as existing alongside it. The land remains vast. The wire remains thin. The work continues. The wire gives itself away before you see it. There is a change in the way it hangs, a subtle wrongness in the curve between poles, the kind that draws your eye without asking permission. You slow your steps, not because the sight alarms you, but because recognition always brings a pause. The prairie remains quiet, the snow lying flat and patient, but the line no longer carries itself with even tension. It dips, then disappears into the white. You reach the place where it has failed. The break is clean in one sense, jagged in another. Metal has parted under a pressure it was never meant to endure for long. Ice still clings to the ends, as though the storm has not yet finished speaking. The wire lies half buried in snow, dark against the pale surface, already beginning to look like it belongs there. You stand over it for a moment, breathing slowly, the cold moving easily through your lungs. There is no disappointment in you, no irritation, only the quiet acknowledgement that this is how things go here. Lines are strung, land is crossed, messages move quickly for a time, and then weather reminds everyone that nothing is permanent. You set down your bag and kneel, brushing snow aside with the back of your glove. The wire resists slightly, stiff with cold, reluctant to be handled. You do not argue with it, you simply begin. The tools come out again, familiar shapes against the white. Your fingers work steadily, even as sensation remains distant. The cold has settled too deeply now to surprise you. It has become a constant, like the horizon or the sky. You notice it only when it changes, and it rarely does. As you prepare the repair, you glance up along the line, tracing its path with your eyes. It stretches away in both directions, supported by poles that grow smaller with distance, each one identical in purpose, if not in condition. Somewhere along that length, the wire has been whole more often than it has been broken. Somewhere else, another break is already forming. The idea does not trouble you. You have learned that progress here is not a forward march. It is a cycle. Build, repair, endure, repeat. Each action buys time, nothing more. Time for a message to pass. Time for a decision to be made far away. Time for someone to believe, briefly, that distance has been conquered. You strip the damaged ends carefully, metal scraping softly against metal. The sound feels intimate in the quiet, small but precise. Snow drifts down around you, not falling so much as settling. The land continuing its slow work of erasure. As you splice the wire, you think about the word connection. It is spoken with confidence, in places where weather is a consideration rather than a constant. Here, connection is fragile by design. It depends on wood planted in frozen ground, on metal stretched thin across open space, on men like you willing to climb when the cold suggests otherwise. The splice comes together under your hands, neat and functional. You test it gently, then a little more firmly. The wire holds, tension redistributing itself along the line. The hum returns, faint but present, like a pulse re-establishing rhythm after interruption. You sit back on your heels and rest for a moment, letting your arms relax. The land offers no acknowledgement. Snow continues to settle. Wind brushes lightly across the surface, rearranging nothing of consequence. The repair feels almost hypothetical against such scale. You pack your tools away slowly, taking care not to rush movements that require precision. Rushing leads to mistakes, and mistakes compound themselves quickly in cold like this. Your breath rises and falls in steady clouds, each one drifting away before it can be considered. Standing again, you look down the line once more. It appears whole now, indistinguishable from any other section you have passed today. The break has been absorbed into continuity, erased as thoroughly as your footprints will be by morning. You shoulder your bag and begin walking again. The repaired wire overhead, the snow firm beneath your boots. The rhythm returns easily. Step, crunch, step, breath. The pattern requires no thought, leaving your mind free to wander in small, unambitious ways. You think about the idea of permanence, how often it is spoken of as a goal, a measure of success. Structures meant to last, systems designed to endure. Out here, permanence feels like a misunderstanding. The land does not oppose it, it simply ignores it. Poles rot, wires snap, men age, messages fade as soon as they're received. The only thing that continues reliably is the need to keep going. Another pole comes into view, its silhouette softened by distance and snow. You approach it without expectation. It will require attention, or it will not. Either outcome is acceptable. As you reach its base, you pause briefly, looking up along its length. Ice clings to its surface, catching light in dull flashes. The wire above it looks stable enough, though you know how deceptive appearances can be. Stability here is provisional, granted moment by moment. You set down your bag and begin the climb once more. Your body responds with practiced obedience. Muscles engage without complaint. Hands move, feet follow. The pole accepts your weight with a familiar creak, a sound that feels almost reassuring in its consistency. Up close, the wood bears scars from years of weather and work, marks that speak quietly of persistence rather than triumph. Reaching the wire, you inspect it carefully. This section holds for now. Ice remains, but not enough to threaten its integrity. You clear what you can, knowing it will return. The action feels less like prevention and more like negotiation. You are buying time again. As you work, you notice how the cold has thinned your thoughts further. They move slowly, without urgency, settling on simple truths rather than questions. The line will break again. Someone will fix it. Messages will pass. None of this changes the nature of the land, or the weather, or the limits of men. You finish and descend, the movement feeling heavier now, not from fatigue alone, but from accumulation. Hours layered atop hours, cold atop cold. When your boots touch the ground again, you stand still for a moment longer than before, letting the world reorient itself around you. The prairie stretches out, unchanged by your efforts. Snow, sky, wire, the same elements arranged in slightly different ways. You take a breath, slow and deep, feeling the cold settle back into its familiar places. You move on again, following the line as it cuts across the empty province, knowing that each repair is temporary and that this does not diminish its necessity. The wire refuses to stay whole. The land refuses to care, and you, steady and unremarkable within it all, continue walking, ready to mend what can be mended, aware that the next break is already waiting somewhere ahead in the white, waiting world. You stop walking, not because the day has reached a natural pause, but because your body suggests it, quietly, without urgency. Hunger arrives here without drama. It does not demand attention. It simply settles into you, another weight carried alongside the cold. The land offers no shelter worth naming. There is a slight dip in the snow near a pole, enough to break the wind just a little, enough to justify stopping. You turn your back to the open prairie and lower yourself carefully, movement slower now, joints stiffened by hours of repetition. The snow compresses beneath you, firm and dry, holding your shape without complaint. You set the bag down and rest your hands on it for a moment before opening it. The wind moves around you, not strong but constant, brushing against your coat, tugging lightly at loose fabric. It does not intend to drive you away. It simply refuses to leave. From the bag, you take out what passes for a meal. Bread hardened by cold, wrapped carefully but still stiff to the touch. A small portion of meat, darkened and preserved more by winter than salt. Nothing here invites appetite. It exists to be eaten, nothing more. You hold the bread for a moment, feeling its resistance. It has lost any memory of softness. You break off a piece with deliberate pressure. The sound sharp in the quiet. Crumbs scatter onto the snow, small dark flecks against the white, already beginning to disappear as drifting powder settles over them. Eating is slow work now, not because you savour it, but because your mouth has learned to move carefully in the cold. Each bite is deliberate. You chew longer than necessary, waiting for stiffness to ease, for sensation to return briefly before retreating again. The taste is muted, reduced to texture more than flavour. You notice salt only because it stands out against the blankness. The wind presses against your face as you eat, carrying cold across your cheeks, your lips. You angle your body slightly, shielding the food as best you can, though the effort feels symbolic rather than effective. Out here, eating against the wind is not about victory, it is about persistence. As you chew, your thoughts drift, not far, not deeply. Hunger has a way of narrowing the mind, drawing it inward. You become aware of small things. The sound of fabric shifting as you move, the faint creak of the pole nearby responding to wind and wire, the way your breath fogs the air, briefly visible before it dissolves. You think about routine, not as comfort but as structure. The habit of stopping to eat, even when warmth is absent and appetite feels abstract. The body expects this pause, this small acknowledgement of its needs. Ignoring it would not make the day easier, it would only shorten it. You have eaten like this many times before, standing, crouching, leaning against poles, or sitting in open snow. Meals measured not by pleasure, but by sufficiency. Enough to keep moving, enough to keep climbing. The thought does not sadden you. It feels factual, neutral. Comfort surrendered itself long ago. What remains is function. You take another bite and let your gaze drift across the prairie. The land looks unchanged, though you know it is not. Snow has shifted, settling into new shapes, filling depressions, smoothing over marks left earlier in the day. Even as you sit, the ground beneath you is adjusting, redistributing weight, slowly reclaiming its surface. Somewhere far along the wire, words continue to move. You imagine them passing overhead, even now, gliding through the cold without awareness of your pause. Messages do not stop for lunch. They do not slow because a man beneath them needs to eat. There is something faintly ironic in that. The system depends on you, yet proceeds as though you are irrelevant. Perhaps that is its strength, or its blindness. You finish the bread and tuck what remains back into the bag, fingers moving stiffly. The act feels ceremonial, marking the end of something small but necessary. You linger a moment longer, letting your body absorb what little energy the food provides. The warmth is subtle, almost imagined, but it is there. Standing again takes effort. Your legs protest quietly, joints stiff, muscles reluctant. You straighten slowly, feeling the weight of the bag settle back against your shoulder. The wind greets you again, unchanged by your brief rest. Before moving on, you glance up at the pole beside you. Ice has begun to form again along its surface, thin and delicate, catching light in dull flashes. The wire above it sags slightly under its own accumulation, not yet enough to demand attention, but enough to make a note of. You know you will be back up there soon. For now, you walk. The rhythm returns gradually, step, crunch, step, breath. The pattern reasserts itself, familiar and steady. Hunger recedes, replaced by the quiet awareness of having done what was required. As you move away from your resting place, the shallow impression you left behind begins to fade. Snow drifts into it almost immediately, softening edges, erasing shape. By the time you reach the next pole, there will be little evidence that you ever stopped at all. The land does not record pauses. The wire continues beside you, its path unwavering despite the weight it carries. You follow it without expectation, knowing that the day still holds hours of cold and climbing. The meal has not made the work easier, it has only made it possible. And that, you have learned, is enough. You adjust your grip on the strap of your bag and move onward across the open prairie, the wind at your side, the wire above you, and the quiet persistence of routine carrying you forward through the white, waiting world. The wind eases as you walk, not enough to bring comfort, only enough to change the sound of it. The wire above you hums more clearly now, its faint vibration no longer scattered by drifting snow. The prairie opens again, wide and empty, as though the storm has finished its statement and moved on. You follow the line at a steady pace, your body warmed only by motion, your thoughts loose and unhurried. Eating has taken the sharpest edge off hunger, leaving behind a dull equilibrium. The day stretches ahead without urgency, measured not in hours but in poles and distance. As you walk, you find yourself thinking about what this wire was meant to do, not in practical terms. Those are obvious. Messages sent, received, answered. Time saved, distance shortened. You think instead about the promise that accompanied it, the idea that connection could be engineered, that if words could travel faster, understanding would follow. The wire hums softly, carrying its invisible traffic. You imagine the signals passing through it, precise and obedient, each one representing a thought someone believed important enough to send. Orders, requests, reassurances, complaints, all of them reduced to the same brief pulses, indistinguishable from one another as they move through metal. Speed has a way of flattening meaning. You think of the men who celebrated this invention, who spoke of it as a triumph over isolation. They imagined families reunited across distance, businesses flourishing, governments ruling more efficiently. They did not imagine how often messages would still fail to convey what was meant, how misunderstanding would persist, merely arriving sooner. You have seen the evidence in the wires themselves. Breaks caused not by failure of design, but by the weight of expectation layered onto something so thin. Ice forms regardless of intention. Wind pulls without concern for purpose. The land does not adjust itself to accommodate optimism. You stop at another pole and look up along the line. The wire stretches onward, disappearing into the pale sky. It looks fragile from here, though you know its strength lies in tension, in being pulled tight between fixed points. Without that tension, it would sag uselessly. Without restraint, it would snap. Connection works much the same way. You begin to climb, movement steady and practiced. The pole creaks beneath you, responding as it always does. Ice has gathered again along the surface, thin but persistent. Your spikes bite cleanly, sending small shivers through the wood. As you rise, your thoughts continue their quiet examination. You think about how loneliness has not diminished since the wire arrived. Men still work in isolation. Families still wait for news that may not come. Messages still fail to bridge the distance between what is said and what is understood. If anything, speed has sharpened disappointment. When replies are expected quickly, silence feels heavier. When news travels fast, there is less time to prepare for it. You reach the wire and clear a section of ice, flakes falling away soundlessly. The metal vibrates faintly under your touch, alive with movement. Somewhere, far away, someone will receive a message moments after it is sent and feel closer to someone they have not seen in years. Somewhere else, someone will receive bad news too quickly to soften its impact. The wire makes no distinction. You secure the line and pause, resting against the pole. From this height, the prairie looks even more empty, the sense of distance amplified by elevation. You can see no sign of the people the wire connects, only the land, vast and unconcerned, stretching beyond the limits of sight. It occurs to you that the wire does not shrink the land at all. It simply overlays it with expectation. The distance remains, as real and demanding as ever. Men may send words across it in seconds, but bodies still move at the same slow pace. Cold still settles into bones. Snow still falls. You descend again, boots finding the ground with familiar certainty. As you walk on, the wire remains beside you, its presence steady, its purpose unchanged. Your thoughts drift toward ambition now. How often this line is used to announce plans, to issue directives, to expand influence into places like this. How often those plans fail to account for what it costs to maintain the connection they depend on. You imagine officials reading messages in heated rooms, tracing routes on maps, drawing straight lines across provinces and territories, lines that look clean and decisive on paper, lines that, out here, become poles and wire, and men climbing into cold. The illusion lies not in the technology itself, but in what people believe it can replace. Presence, patience, understanding. These things still require time, still demand effort, still resist simplification. You walk on, your steps steady, the wire guiding you through the open land. The cold remains constant, but your body has learned how to carry it without complaint. The work continues without drama, each pole offering the same quiet challenge. As the afternoon light begins to soften, the sky taking on a faint, pale hue, you notice how the wire catches it differently now. It glints briefly, then fades back into shadow. The effect is subtle, easily missed. Connection, you think, often is. You stop beneath another pole, set down your bag, and prepare to climb again. The routine unfolds without effort. Hands move, feet follow. The pole accepts you. The wire waits. As you work, the illusion of connection lingers in your thoughts, not as bitterness, but as understanding. The wire does what it can. Nothing more, nothing less. You finish the repair and descend, the movement slower now, the day settling into its later rhythm. When your boots touch the snow again, you pause briefly, feeling the weight of hours pressing gently against you. The land remains vast, the wire remains thin. Messages continue to move faster than men, and you continue walking beneath them, aware that connection, however swift, has always been partial, and that the work of holding it together will never truly be finished. The afternoon light flattens as you move farther along the wire, losing what little warmth it once pretended to offer. The sky pales into a uniform sheet, neither bright nor dark, simply present. The land beneath it looks the same in every direction, an expanse that seems less like a place than a condition you pass through. You walk steadily, the wire guiding you as it always does. Its presence has become so constant that you notice it most when it changes pitch, when the hum tightens or slackens, signaling strain somewhere ahead. It is a quiet language, learned over years, understood by few. As you approach the next pole, you can already sense that something here will need attention, not because it looks broken, but because it carries itself differently. The wire dips slightly, the insulator bearing more weight than it should. These signs are subtle. They would go unnoticed by anyone not paid to care. You stop, set down your bag, and begin the climb. The pole feels colder now, the wood stripped of any lingering warmth. Ice clings to it in thin sheets, cracking softly as your spikes bite in. Each movement sends a small vibration through the structure, a reminder that nothing here is truly solid. Halfway up you pause, resting your weight against the pole. From here, the wire stretches onward, like a boundary rather than a bridge, dividing the land without changing it. You can almost imagine it as a border drawn through emptiness, claiming space without inhabiting it. When you reach the wire, you see that it has not broken, but it is close. Ice has accumulated unevenly, pulling the line off balance. You begin clearing it carefully, flakes drifting away into the open air. The wire responds with a faint shudder, tension redistributing itself along its length. As you work, you think about what passes through your hands. Messages of trade, carrying prices, and contracts. Instructions from distant offices, firm and decisive, written by men who will never feel this cold. Notices of urgency, marked important, demanding speed. The wire carries all of it faithfully, without regard for content. It occurs to you that the empire this line serves is mostly invisible from here. It exists in documents, ledgers, and correspondence, in decisions made far away. Out here, it reduces itself to wood, metal, and the labour required to keep them aligned. You have never been asked how the work feels. No one has inquired about the weight of ice on wire, or the way cold settles into joints, or how often you climb, knowing the line will fail again. The system does not ask such questions. It assumes the line will be there. You clear the last of the ice and secure the wire, checking the insulator for cracks. It holds, though not convincingly. Many things do not, if you look closely enough. As you descend, your thoughts remain with the idea of service. Not in the grand sense often spoken of, but in its quieter, more practical form. You serve by maintaining, by preventing collapse long enough for the next message to pass, by absorbing discomfort so that others may remain unaware of distance. There is irony in that arrangement. The faster communication becomes, the less visible its maintenance. Speed creates the illusion of effortlessness. The work disappears behind results. You step back onto the snow and shoulder your bag, feeling its familiar pull. The wind brushes against you again. Cooler now, the day edging toward evening. You walk on, the wire steady above you, carrying its unseen burdens. As you move, you imagine a message travelling this very moment. Perhaps it concerns commerce, a shipment delayed, a payment expected. Perhaps it carries authority, a directive issued without hesitation. The sender likely believes it arrives intact, unquestioned. They do not imagine the pauses it has required. The climbs, the repairs, the quiet endurance beneath it all. You reach another pole and repeat the process. Set the bag down. Test the wood. Begin the ascent. Each repetition feels heavier now, not because the work has changed, but because accumulation has its own weight. Hours of cold settle deeper into muscle and bone, layering themselves invisibly. At the wire, you find only minor issues, a loose fitting, ice beginning to form. You address them efficiently, without lingering. Efficiency has replaced thoroughness as fatigue sets in. You do what must be done, and no more. As you work, you think about the word empire, how large it sounds, how abstract, how distant from this quiet stretch of prairie. Empires imagine themselves as permanent, expansive, unchallenged. Yet here, their reach depends on a line thin enough to snap under winter's patience. You finish and descend again, movement slower now, more careful. The ground greets you with its familiar firmness, snow compressed beneath your boots. You pause briefly, letting your balance settle, then continue walking. The light continues to fade, though not dramatically. Dusk here is gradual, a soft dimming rather than a clear transition. The sky shifts toward grey, the land reflecting it without comment. You walk beneath the wire, its dark line more pronounced against the pale sky. It feels closer now, more immediate, as though the narrowing light has drawn it down toward you. Messages continue to pass, indifferent to time of day. Your thoughts turn again to endurance, not heroic endurance, not the kind spoken of later with admiration, just the quiet continuation of effort repeated day after day, unnoticed by the system it sustains. There is no bitterness in this realization, Only clarity. The Empire does not notice because it does not need to. That is how it functions. Visibility is reserved for outcomes, not processes. You stop at another pole and begin to climb once more. Your hands move with less precision now. Fingers stiff, movements deliberate. You adjust your grip more often, compensate for reduced sensation. The pole accepts your weight as it always has, creaking softly in response. At the wire, you make another small repair, clearing ice, tightening a fitting. The hum steadies, the line holds. Descending again, you feel the day pressing in on you, not as exhaustion, but as density. Each movement requires more intention. Each step carries more weight. When you walk on, the land remains unchanged. Snow, sky, wire. The Empire's presence remains abstract, carried in signals you cannot see. You continue beneath it all, a small figure maintaining a vast system that will never pause to consider the cold settling into your bones, the quiet endurance that keeps its messages moving across an empty province. The irony does not sting. It simply exists, like the wire itself, stretched thin across a land that neither notices nor cares, and yet continues to demand your steady, unremarkable labour. The light changes so gradually that you do not notice it at first. There is no clear moment when day becomes evening, no sharp edge where one ends and the other begins. Instead, the prairie seems to exhale. Brightness thins, draining quietly from the snow, leaving behind a softer, flatter world. Shadows lengthen without drama, stretching low across the ground until they blur into one another. You continue walking, guided as much by habit now as by sight. The wire above you grows darker against the sky, its line more pronounced as the background fades. It no longer glints when it catches the light. It absorbs it instead, becoming a silhouette, a quiet boundary between earth and air. Your pace slows, though you do not consciously decide to slow it. The body adjusts on its own, conserving what remains. Movements that were once deliberate now flow automatically, shaped by repetition rather than thought. Step follows step. Breath follows breath. The work carries you forward without requiring instruction. The prairie grows quieter as dusk settles in, not because sound disappears, but because it simplifies. Wind softens, no longer sharp, just present. Snow shifts faintly underfoot. The wire hums low and steady, its voice more noticeable now that other sounds have receded. You stop beneath another pole and look up. The sky has taken on a muted tone, neither blue nor grey, something in between. Clouds drift slowly, their edges dissolving as light fades. The pole stands darker now, its shape less defined, as though evening is gently erasing detail. Climbing feels different at this hour. Not harder, not easier, just slower. You move with care, relying more on memory than sight. Your hands know where to go. Your feet find purchase without needing to be guided. The pole creaks softly beneath you, a familiar sound in the gathering quiet. At the wire, your fingers work steadily, clearing ice where it has begun to reform, tightening what has loosened. The tasks feel smaller now, less urgent, not because they matter less, but because the day's insistence has softened. The land seems less demanding at dusk, more resigned. You pause briefly, leaning into the pole, and look out across the prairie. The distance feels deeper now, the emptiness more complete. Without bright light to define edges, the land becomes an impression rather than a place. Snow and the sky blend together, separated only by subtle shifts in tone. You think about how much of your work happens like this, in these quiet hours when no one is watching, when effort blends seamlessly into routine. There is no one to witness the climb, the repair, the descent. Only the wire remains, carrying on as though nothing happened. Descending, you move carefully, mindful of the fading light. Your boots meet the snow again, and you stand still for a moment, letting your balance settle. The world feels slower now, thicker somehow, as though dusk has added weight to everything it touches. You walk on. The wire guides you through the dimming landscape, its path unwavering even as visibility fades. Poles appear later now, emerging from shadow only when you are close. You adjust, shortening your stride, paying closer attention to the ground beneath your feet. Fatigue settles deeper into you, not as sharp exhaustion, but as a quiet heaviness. Muscles feel full, occupied. Thoughts move more slowly, no longer wandering far. The day's labour has narrowed your focus down to what is immediately necessary. You stop again at a pole and repeat the familiar motions. Set the bag down, test the wood, begin the climb. Each action flows into the next, without pause. The body knows what to do, even as the mind grows still. At the wire, you find only minor work to be done. A small adjustment, a brief clearing of ice. You complete it efficiently, without embellishment. The wire hums on, indifferent. As you descend, you notice how your hands feel now. Not numb exactly, but distant. Sensation has retreated further, leaving behind a dull awareness rather than clear feeling. You rely on pressure, on resistance, on memory. The cold has taught your body to conserve itself. Back on the ground, you shoulder the bag and continue. The prairie darkens further, shadows pooling in low places, filling hollows and dips. The snow reflects what little light remains, giving the world a faint, diffuse glow. It is not dark yet, just muted. You become aware of how quiet your thoughts have grown. Earlier, reflections came easily. Now they thin out, replaced by simple observation. The sound of your steps, the pull of the bag, the presence of the wire. Everything else feels unnecessary. This is how the day often ends. Not with resolution, not with completion, but with a gradual easing. The work does not stop because it is finished. It slows because light and body and land all suggest the same thing. You reach another pole and pause, considering it briefly. The wire above it looks stable enough. Ice has not yet claimed it again. You decide, without formal decision, to leave it for now. Some things can wait. Walking on, you feel the air grow colder as the last of the day's warmth disappears. The cold settles more firmly now, reclaiming space that movement once held at bay. You adjust your coat slightly, more out of habit than expectation. The wire remains with you, its dark line guiding you through the softening light. Messages continue to move along it, unseen, unheard. The people sending them are likely indoors now. Lamps lit, warmth close at hand. Evening for them means rest. For you, it means transition. You follow the line a little farther, then slow again. The land feels heavier now, the quiet deeper. You know where you are, you know where you will stop soon. These decisions come without thought, shaped by experience rather than planning. As you move, dusk settles fully over the prairie. The sky darkens into a uniform shade, stars not yet visible, clouds holding the last of the light. The world feels suspended, paused between day and night. Your movements have softened into habit, each step taken because it always has been. Each breath steady, measured. The work has not ended, but it has loosened its grip, allowing the quiet to take over. You walk on beneath the wire, now barely visible against the darkening sky, carrying the day with you as it fades gently into shadow. Night does not fall all at once. It seeps in quietly, settling into the hollows of the land, deepening shadows, until the prairie becomes a broad, indistinct surface beneath your feet. The wire above you fades into near invisibility, present only when it catches a trace of starlight or presses faintly against the sky. You walk a little farther than planned, not out of stubbornness, but because stopping requires recognition, and recognition comes slowly now. Eventually, the shape of shelter resolves itself out of the dark. It is modest, almost apologetic in its construction. A small telegraph hut set back from the line, wood darkened by age and weather, roof bowed slightly under years of snow. It does not promise comfort, it promises enclosure. Out here, that distinction matters. You approach without relief, only acknowledgement. Shelter is not a reward. It is a condition that allows the next day to happen. The door resists when you push it open, swollen by moisture and cold. Wood scrapes against wood with a low complaint before giving way. Inside, the air is still and colder than you expected, trapped and unmoving. The darkness holds its shape, thickened by the absence of light. You step inside and close the door behind you, sealing out the wind. The silence deepens immediately, no longer stretched across open space, but contained within rough walls. The smallness of the room presses in, but not unpleasantly. It is a different kind of quiet, one that acknowledges your presence rather than ignoring it. You set your bag down carefully, more aware now of its weight. Muscles loosen slightly as the burden leaves your shoulder. The relief subtle but immediate. You stand still for a moment, letting your eyes adjust. Shapes emerge slowly. A narrow bunk against one wall, a small iron stove in the corner, a crate repurposed as a table. Nothing unnecessary, nothing inviting. You move toward the stove first. Lighting it is a practiced sequence, carried out with hands that feel stiff and oversized. Fingers fumble briefly, then remember what to do. Paper crinkles softly. A match strikes, the sound sharp in the enclosed space. Flame flares briefly, then settles into a small, steady burn. The stove takes its time. Metal absorbs heat reluctantly, as though unconvinced it will last. You feed it sparingly, knowing excess now will mean cold later. Patience has become second nature. As the fire catches, a faint warmth begins to spread, barely noticeable at first. It does not rush. It seeps outward, touching surfaces cautiously. The air remains cold, but the promise of change is there. You remove your gloves slowly, placing them near the stove, but not too close. Steam rises faintly from the leather, the moisture trapped inside escaping at last. Your hands feel strange without their covering, exposed and pale, skin marked by red patches where cold has pressed longest. Sensation returns unevenly. It begins as a dull ache, then sharpens briefly into something closer to pain. Pins and needles spread through your fingers, your palms, creeping up toward your wrists. You flex them gently, careful not to force movement too quickly. The cold loosens its grip reluctantly, leaving behind a heaviness that feels deeper than numbness. You sit on the edge of the bunk and lean forward, elbows resting on your knees. The heat brushes your face faintly, enough to fog your breath less, enough to remind you what warmth feels like. It does not comfort so much as inform. It tells you what has been missing. Exhaustion settles in now, not dramatically, not as collapse, but as depth. It sinks into you layer by layer, heavier than the cold ever was. Cold sharpens awareness. Exhaustion dulls it. Thoughts slow further, stretching out, losing urgency. You reach into your bag again, not for tools this time, but for small necessities. A tin cup, a bit of water, something warm to hold. You pour carefully, movements unhurried. The cup warms your hands almost immediately, heat transferring eagerly into skin that has waited all day for it. You drink slowly. Each swallow feels deliberate, the warmth travelling downward, spreading gently. It does not erase fatigue, it settles alongside it. As you sit there, the sounds of the day fade fully. No wind reaches you now. No wire hums. The silence is complete, broken only by the soft crackle of the stove and the faint settling of the structure as temperatures shift outside. You think briefly about the wire beyond these walls. It continues to carry messages, even now, indifferent to night. Somewhere, operators sit at desks, tapping keys, translating pulses into words. They work by lamplight, hands warmed, breath easy. You do not resent them. The thought passes through you without emotion. This is simply how things are arranged. Your role ends where theirs begins. Connection has many forms, and this is one of them. The warmth continues its slow advance. Your boots soften slightly, leather relaxing. Ice melts and drips onto the floor, darkening the wood beneath. You remove them carefully, setting them aside to dry as best they can. Your feet ache dully as air reaches them, sensation returning in small waves. You stretch your legs out in front of you and rest back against the wall. The wood is cold, but solid. It does not press into you. It simply holds its place. Fatigue deepens further, settling into your shoulders, your spine, your neck. The tension that carried you through the day loosens, and with it comes a heaviness that makes movement feel optional. The body begins to consider stillness, not as pause, but as necessity. You allow yourself to sit there, unmoving, letting the heat do what it can. It arrives too late to restore what the day has taken, but it arrives in time to make rest possible. That is enough. Your thoughts drift without direction, not toward memory, not toward tomorrow. Just drifting. Images surface briefly, poles against sky, snow filling tracks, wire sagging, then humming again. They appear and fade without commentary. The stove crackles softly, a steady, reassuring sound. The flame has settled into a consistent rhythm, neither demanding attention nor threatening to go out. You listen to it without focusing, letting it anchor you in the present moment. Eventually you rise and move toward the bunk. The mattress is thin, offering little softness, but it is dry and it is horizontal. You lower yourself onto it carefully, muscles protesting briefly before surrendering. The position feels strange after hours of movement, but the unfamiliarity fades quickly. You lie on your back and stare up at the low ceiling, barely visible in the dim light. The room smells faintly of smoke and damp wood, a scent that feels oddly neutral. Not pleasant, not unpleasant, just present. Warmth continues to return sensation slowly, unevenly. Fingers tingle, toes ache faintly. You ignore it. These feelings require no response. Exhaustion settles fully now, heavier than any layer of clothing, deeper than cold. It presses gently, insistently, encouraging stillness. The day has ended not with closure, but with quiet acceptance. Outside, the prairie lies dark and vast, the wire stretching on through the night, carrying words between places that feel closer on maps than they do in truth. Inside, you rest. The heat arrives too late to change what the day has been, but in time to prepare you for what comes next. And as the stove continues its soft, steady work, your breathing slows, your thoughts thin, and the long wait of the day finally begins to ease into sleep. Sleep does not arrive immediately. It circles you first, cautious, as though uncertain whether you are ready to be claimed. The warmth from the stove settles unevenly across the room, rising and falling with the slow rhythm of the fire. Shadows shift along the walls, moving just enough to remind you that time has not stopped, only softened. You lie still, hands resting where they fell, breath steady and shallow. Sensation has returned enough to be noticeable, but not enough to disturb you. There is a faint ache in your fingers, a dull awareness in your feet. These things no longer demand attention. They simply exist in the quiet Xiaofamat. Your thoughts begin to wander again, not toward tomorrow's labour, not toward the cold waiting outside the door. Instead, they drift upward, out through the roof, along the invisible path of the wire that stretches beyond this small room and into the dark. You imagine it running across the prairie, pole after pole, carrying its steady hum through the night. Words move along it even now. You picture them not as signals or pulses, but as letters, because letters feel slower, heavier, more human. Ink on paper, hands folded around envelopes, seals pressed into wax. Even though the Telegraph has stripped away those details, the impulse behind the messages remains the same. Somewhere, a man sends news of a successful deal. Somewhere else, a woman waits for word that does not come as quickly as she hoped. Orders are issued. Reassurances are offered. Apologies are attempted, all of it reduced to brief electrical patterns that flash past your hands during the day without leaving a trace. You will never read them. That has always been part of the arrangement. You're close enough to touch the wire, to feel its vibration, to sense when it strains under weight, but its contents pass beyond you, untouched by your attention. There is a certain mercy in that distance. If you knew the words, perhaps they would linger. Perhaps they would demand reaction, reflection, judgment. Ignorance allows the work to remain simple. You imagine a message sent in haste. Its sender convinced that urgency will grant it power. It races across the province, reaching its destination far sooner than it ever could before. And yet, when it arrives, it changes very little. Circumstances remain, decisions remain complicated, the land remains vast. You think about how often hope travels this way, compressed into brief statements, sent ahead of reality. How often regret follows close behind, trying to catch up. The wire carries both without preference. The stove crackles softly, pulling your attention back into the room. For a moment, the sound feels reassuring in its consistency. You shift slightly on the bunk, the mattress creaking faintly beneath you. The movement feels unnecessary, but familiar. Habit extends even into rest. Your thoughts return to the wire. You remember standing beneath it earlier, hands numb, clearing ice while messages slipped past overhead. The contrast feels almost absurd now. Words flying across the province while you moved at the pace of climbing and walking, each action measured, each step earned. Speed and slowness exist side by side without conflict. They do not acknowledge one another. You imagine a letter of love travelling along the wire, stripped of handwriting, reduced to code. It arrives quickly, but something is lost in the translation. Tone flattens, warmth thins. The receiver reads the words and feels both closeness and distance at once. You imagine a message of grief sent because waiting feels unbearable. It arrives swiftly, too swiftly, leaving no time for the journey to soften its arrival. The wire does not hesitate. It does not prepare anyone for what it carries. You imagine instructions issued by someone far away, written confidently, sent without awareness of the conditions they will pass through. The wire delivers them faithfully. You repair the line so that they may continue to move unimpeded. None of this feels dramatic. It feels inevitable. The content of the wires matters greatly to those who send and receive it. To you, it exists as weight and tension, as ice and strain. You do not handle meaning, you handle infrastructure. There is a strange freedom in that. You think about how many lives have intersected, briefly, through the wire, without ever touching. How many decisions have been influenced by words carried across this land? How many misunderstandings have persisted despite speed? How many ambitions have travelled confidently into places that do not accommodate them? The wire has never promised wisdom, only transmission. Your eyelids grow heavier now, thoughts slowing further, their edges blurring. Images replace sentences, the lines stretching endlessly, poles standing dark against snow, the quiet hum that continues whether anyone listens or not. Outside, the prairie holds its breath. The night is cold and still, the land resting beneath the stars. The wire remains awake, its work uninterrupted by darkness. Inside, the warmth has settled fully. Your breathing deepens, becoming slower, more regular. Sensation fades again, not into numbness this time, but into rest. Just before sleep takes you, one last thought drifts through. You have spent the day keeping words alive without ever hearing them. You have ensured that messages of hope, regret, authority, and reassurance continue to move across a land that does not care what they say. Most of those words will change nothing at all, and yet the wire will carry them anyway, and you will climb again to keep it so. The thought does not trouble you. It dissolves gently, like breath in cold air, and you sink fully into sleep as the quiet work of connection continues overhead, unseen and unread, moving steadily through the dark. Morning arrives without ceremony. It does not announce itself with colour or warmth. It reveals itself slowly, as a thinning of darkness, a soft loosening of night's grip on the edges of the room. The stove has burned low, leaving behind a faint, stubborn heat that lingers close to the iron, and nowhere else. The air beyond it has already reclaimed its cold. You wake not because you feel rested, but because stillness has reached its limit. Your eyes open to the same narrow ceiling, barely visible in the dim light. For a moment, there is no sense of time at all, only the quiet weight of the body, heavy and uncooperative, pressed into the thin mattress. Sensation returns slowly, like sound after a great distance, a dull ache in the shoulders, stiffness along the spine, fingers slow to curl when you ask them to move, breath fogs faintly in front of your face. You lie still for a while, letting awareness gather. The room smells of cold ash and damp wood. Somewhere outside, the prairie waits, unchanged by your rest. The wire stretches on through the night and into this new day, indifferent to whether you slept well or not. Eventually, you sit up. The movement costs more than it should. Muscles protest quietly, not in pain, but in reminder. The warmth of last night has retreated, leaving behind only the memory of it. Cold fills the space immediately, settling into the room as though it never truly left. You dress slowly, methodically. Each layer feels heavier than it did yesterday. Stiff with cold, reluctant to bend, you do not rush. Rushing serves no purpose. The day will take what it takes. When you pull on your gloves, your fingers hesitate inside them, unsure of their boundaries. You flex them gently, once, twice, coaxing movement back into cooperation. The leather is cold again, unwelcoming, familiar. You stand and move toward the door, pausing briefly to look around the small shelter. Nothing has changed. Nothing needs to be acknowledged. It has done what it could. Outside, the door opens with a low scrape, and the cold meets you immediately, clean and decisive. Morning light spreads thinly across the prairie, pale and flat, revealing a world that looks much as it did yesterday. Snow lies undisturbed where night has smoothed it over. The sky holds no promise of kindness. You step out and close the door behind you. The wire is there, just as it was before, cutting a dark line across the pale sky. For a moment, it appears intact, whole. The illusion lasts only until you begin to walk. As you move along its path, you notice the first sign, a change in tension, a subtle slackness that does not belong. You slow without thinking, eyes tracing the line ahead. Farther on, the wire dips more noticeably, its line no longer confident. You stop. The break has already happened. It is not dramatic. There is no violent tangle, no great collapse, just a section where the wire has parted, pulled down by ice or wind, or the quiet insistence of cold working through metal over time. It lies against the snow, dark and still, as though resting. You feel no disappointment, only recognition. Yesterday's effort already belongs to the past. The repair held long enough to matter, and that is all it was ever meant to do. The land has had the night to reclaim what it could. The line has yielded where it was weakest. You set down your bag and kneel beside the break. Snow brushes against your knees, dry and fine. The wire is stiff beneath your glove, reluctant to move. Ice clings to it in small, persistent ridges, each one a quiet argument against continuity. You begin again. The tools come out, familiar and unchanged. Your hands move more slowly this morning, not because you are uncertain, but because they are stiff, reluctant to warm themselves without purpose. The cold sharpens briefly as metal meets metal, sensation flaring before dulling again. As you work, your thoughts remain close, anchored to the immediate task. There is no room for reflection yet. The day is still too young. The body demands attention before the mind can wander. You strip the wire, clean the ends, prepare the splice. Each motion carries the memory of countless others, layered invisibly into muscle and habit. This work does not feel repetitive, it feels continuous. The wind brushes past you lightly, testing the surface of the snow. The prairie looks calm, almost gentle in the morning light. That calm is misleading. You know how quickly it can change. You also know it does not need to. The wire comes together under your hands once more. You secure it carefully, checking the tension, adjusting until it holds. The faint hum returns, subtle but present, a sign that words will move again. You sit back on your heels and look up along the line. It stretches away into the distance, pole after pole, each one a quiet reminder that this break is not an exception. It is part of the pattern. Standing, again you feel the stiffness in your legs, the way cold has settled back into joints that barely had time to recover. You straighten slowly, letting balance return, then shoulder the bag. Walking resumes. The morning grows brighter by degrees, but the light offers no warmth. It simply reveals more of the same. Snow, sky, wire. The land looks as though it has reset itself overnight, erasing yesterday's passage, smoothing over effort. As you approach the next pole, you glance up instinctively. The wire here holds, but ice has already begun to form again, thin and delicate. You can see how the day will unfold. The order of events feels familiar. You climb. The pole accepts you with its usual creak. Your spikes bite, sending small vibrations through the wood. The climb feels heavier than it did yesterday, not because it is more difficult, but because nothing has been added back in. Fatigue carries over, it accumulates. At the wire you clear ice and make small adjustments. The work feels quieter now, less urgent. Morning has not yet fully claimed the land, and there is a sense of repetition settling into place. Descending again, you move carefully, aware that your body has not yet fully warmed. The ground meets you with its familiar firmness. You stand still for a moment, letting your balance settle, then move on. As you walk, the faint understanding grows clearer. Nothing you did yesterday was wasted. It served its purpose. It carried messages through the night. It allowed the system to continue for a while longer. That is the measure of success here. The land does not remember effort, the wire does not honour it. They respond only to conditions. You continue along the line, already adjusting your pace to the demands of the day. The morning stretches ahead, pale and indifferent. Breaks will appear, repairs will follow. The cycle will repeat itself without comment, and you will move through it as you always do, steady and unremarkable, accepting that the past dissolves quickly out here, leaving only the present task and the quiet understanding that tomorrow will look much the same. The wire hums faintly above you, newly whole for now, and you walk beneath it into the cold, familiar morning, ready to mend what has already begun to give way again. The morning settles into itself as you move along the line, no longer new, no longer tentative. Light spreads thinly across the prairie, revealing what was already there. Snow reflects it without warmth. The sky holds it without promise. The wire runs on, steady for the moment, its hum a quiet reminder that something unseen is always in motion. You walk with less urgency now. Not because the work has diminished, but because urgency rarely improves anything here. The land has taught you that patience is not a virtue so much as a requirement. As your steps carry you forward, your thoughts stretch outward, widening in a way they rarely do during the sharper hours of cold and effort. The repetition of movement frees them. Step after step, pole after pole, the line unfolding ahead of you like a timeline laid across the snow. You begin to think beyond the day, not in ambition, not in planning, but in perspective. You consider the men who first stood where you stand now, surveying this empty province and imagining lines drawn cleanly across it. They believed they were building something lasting, something that would tame distance, civilize silence, bring order to vastness. They were not entirely wrong, but they were not entirely right either. The poles they set have been replaced more than once. The wire has been restrung, repaired, rethought. Tools have changed slightly. Methods have been refined, yet the essential work remains unchanged. Someone still walks this line. Someone still climbs into cold. Someone still contends with forces that do not negotiate. You stop beneath another pole and look up, eyes tracing the wood from its frozen base to where it meets the wire. It stands straight enough, though you can see where years of wind have leaned it just slightly off true. Even the most carefully placed things are altered over time. Climbing again feels familiar, almost automatic. Your body responds without complaint. Spikes biting, hands finding purchase. The pole creaks softly, acknowledging your weight, your presence. It has felt this before. At the wire you pause longer than necessary, resting against the wood, letting your gaze drift across the open land. From this height, the prairie feels even more expansive, a wide, pale canvas, stretching in every direction. It occurs to you that this view has changed very little over generations. Snow has fallen here before. Wind has scoured this ground long before wire crossed it. The land has absorbed each new system, placed upon it with the same indifference. You think about permanence, how often it is promised, how rarely it is delivered. Systems are built with confidence, spoken of as final solutions, as endpoints. Yet each one demands maintenance. Each one frays at its edges. Each one requires labour long after its novelty has faded. The telegraph is no different. You clear a thin layer of ice from the wire, flakes drifting down, lost before they touch the ground. The action feels small against the scale of your thoughts, but you know better than to dismiss small actions. They accumulate. They are how systems survive at all. Descending again, you move carefully. The day is still young enough to demand attention. Your boots press into snow that looks untouched, though you know it has been shaped by wind through the night. The land hides its changes well. Walking on, you consider how this pattern repeats itself across time. Before the wire, there were roads cut through wilderness, then ruts worn by wagons, then paths widened and narrowed again. Each generation believed its solution more refined than the last. Each left behind evidence of effort, layered atop effort. You imagine future systems replacing this one. New lines laid, perhaps buried, perhaps invisible. Faster communication, greater reach. The same belief in progress, renewed and unquestioned. And with it, the same need for someone to maintain what cannot maintain itself. The thought does not feel cynical. It feels observational. You stop at another pole and repeat the work. Set down the bag, test the wood, begin the climb. The sequence unfolds without friction. Habit has smoothed its edges. At the wire, you find no break, only strain beginning to show. You adjust it carefully, redistributing tension, buying time. That phrase returns to you again, buying time. It feels like an accurate description of much human labour. You're not building the future here. You're extending the present. As you descend, your thoughts return to the idea of history as effort rather than event. So much attention is given to beginnings, to firsts, to moments of invention and declaration. Far less is given to what follows. The maintenance, the repetition, the quiet work that keeps ideas alive long enough to matter. You walk on, the wire steady above you, the poles marching across the land with a patience that mirrors your own. Each one marks a point where intention met reality and compromised. The cold remains constant, but it feels less intrusive now. Your body has accepted it as part of the environment rather than an obstacle. Endurance has become background noise. As the sun climbs higher, though it offers no warmth, the sky brightens slightly. The prairie reflects this change without enthusiasm. Snow sparkles briefly, then settles back into dullness. Beauty here is subtle, easily overlooked. You pause beneath another pole, looking out across the expanse. It occurs to you that very few people will ever see this view as you do. Fewer still will understand it. The emptiness, the scale, the way systems stretch thin across it and require constant attention. You think about the word progress again, how it suggests movement forward, away from effort. How misleading that can be. Progress does not eliminate labour, it redistributes it. Often it hides it. You shoulder your bag and continue walking. The line extends ahead, disappearing into distance, just as it did yesterday and the day before. Somewhere along it, another weakness waits. Somewhere else, a message moves, unaware of how temporary its path truly is. You climb again when needed. You repair what you find. You descend and walk on. This is not futility. It is continuity. History does not repeat itself in grand gestures. It repeats itself in labour, in maintenance, in people doing necessary work long after applause has faded and attention has moved elsewhere. You are part of that repetition now, whether anyone records it or not. The land does not care. The wire does not remember. But the system persists because someone continues to walk, to climb, to mend. You look ahead along the line, not searching for an end. You know there is none, only more of the same. Stretching outward, sustained by effort renewed each day. And as you move through the cold, carrying tools that promise only enough, you understand the long view not as discouragement, but as clarity. Nothing built by human hands is finished. It is only held together, for a time, against forces that do not care at all. The land opens again as you move forward, wide and unremarkable, offering no sign that it has ever resisted you or welcomed you. Snow stretches ahead in a pale, uninterrupted sheet, smoothed by wind and time until it resembles something unfinished, waiting for nothing in particular. The wire runs on beside you, steady for now, a thin certainty suspended above a world that does not require it. You walk without measuring distance anymore. Poles pass at intervals you no longer count. The rhythm of movement has replaced intention. Your body carries you onward because that is what it has learned to do. Step, wait, breath, repeat. Each action flows into the next without argument. The cold remains, but it has lost its sharpness. It settles around you like a familiar presence, no longer demanding attention. You feel it in your lungs, in the stiffness of your hands, in the way your thoughts move slowly now. But it no longer defines the moment. It has become part of the background, like the sky or the snow beneath your boots. Ahead, the wire dips and rises gently, following the uneven logic of poles planted years ago by men who believed this line would shape the land. From where you stand, it looks less like a declaration and more like a suggestion, easily overlooked, easily erased. In places, drifting snow has climbed the lower sections of the poles, softening their outlines, as though the land is slowly reclaiming them. You pause beneath one of these poles and look up. The wire is intact here, humming faintly, carrying whatever words are passing through it at this moment. You imagine them briefly, not as messages with meaning, but as movement itself, energy travelling across distance, indifferent to where it has been or where it will go. The content no longer matters, only the motion. You do not climb this pole. There is nothing that requires your attention here. No strain, no ice heavy enough to justify effort. You stand for a moment longer than necessary, then move on. Leaving something untouched feels almost unfamiliar after so much repair, but it feels right. As you walk, the wind stirs lightly across the prairie, lifting loose snow and carrying it in low, shifting patterns. It moves without direction, without destination, reshaping the surface in small, quiet ways. The marks you leave behind soften almost immediately, edges blurring, depth filling in. By the time you reach the next pole, there is little sign you are ever there at all. You think about how little remains of most work, not just yours, but all of it. Roads wear down, buildings crumble, systems evolve, then vanish. What endures is not the structure, but the need that created it. Communication, connection, control. These desires persist, reshaping themselves with each generation. The wire beside you will not last forever. You know this with certainty. It will be replaced, buried, rendered obsolete. Another system will take its place, promising permanence, promising ease. And someone, somewhere, will be tasked with maintaining it against forces that do not care. You reach another pole and stop again, not because there is work to be done, but because stopping feels like part of the movement now. You rest your hand briefly against the wood. It is cold, rough, familiar. The pole does not respond. It does not need to. Looking out across the prairie, you notice how the horizon dissolves into sky, the boundary between them barely perceptible. Distance loses its meaning here. Everything blends together eventually. Snow becomes cloud, ground becomes air. The line itself begins to fade where light and shadow soften it. History feels much the same. From close up, effort looks distinct. Each climb, each repair, each step taken against cold and fatigue. From farther away, it becomes a blur of movement, difficult to separate into individual actions. From farther still, it disappears entirely, absorbed into the larger shape of time. You walk on. The day has settled into a steady rhythm, neither beginning nor ending, simply continuing. There is no sense of completion waiting ahead, no final pole, no last repair. The work stretches outward, not in a straight line toward resolution, but in a quiet loop that returns again and again to the same needs. The wire hums faintly overhead. Snow shifts underfoot. Wind passes and moves on. You think briefly about memory, how little of this will be remembered. Your name will not be recorded in any meaningful way. The repairs you make today will leave no visible trace by tomorrow. The messages that pass because of your work will be read, acted upon, forgotten. This realization does not trouble you. Memory has never been the measure of value here. Function has. Continuation. The simple fact that things keep moving because someone kept them from stopping. You approach another pole where the wire sags slightly, just enough to suggest attention will be needed soon. Not urgently, not yet. You make a note of it without thinking, a quiet acknowledgement stored somewhere behind awareness. You will climb when it becomes necessary. For now, you keep walking. The prairie stretches on, vast and unconcerned. The wind continues its patient work, rearranging the surface of the world grain by grain. The wire remains suspended between poles, thinner than the distance it crosses, stronger than it appears. As you move farther along the line, the poles grow harder to distinguish. Snow thickens around their bases. Shadows soften their outlines. In places, the wire itself seems to vanish against the sky, visible only when it shifts slightly or catches a hint of light. The line fades into snow, yet you follow it anyway. Not because you can always see it, but because you know it is there, because your steps have learned its path, because walking has become its own justification. You climb when needed, you repair what fails, you descend and continue. There is no sense of progress or regression in this, only motion sustained against stillness. History, you realize, does not move forward so much as it moves on. It carries labor with it, quietly repeating patterns under new names, new materials, new promises. The prairie wind does the same. It crosses the land endlessly, reshaping nothing permanently, remembering nothing at all. And you move within that motion, one figure beneath a wide sky, maintaining a line that will eventually disappear, performing work that leaves no monument, carrying tools that offer only enough. The wire hums, the snow drifts, the wind passes. You keep walking, not toward an ending, not toward recognition, but because the line continues, and because for as long as it does, someone must follow it through the white, waiting world. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Rich Davis, and Leslie Schofield. Sleep well.